Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I am your host, Stacey, Andon, and oh my goodness, I cannot wait to bring this guest on today for this podcast. Please welcome Aysin Karaduman. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct. And Aysin is the most incredible life coach, holistic. She's all about redefining what it means to live a good life, not just for you, but what it means for each of us individually and have the courage to go after it. So I cannot wait to dive into this conversation today. Greetings, welcome. I probably didn't get all of your tools and all the amazing things too that you do. You're not just a life coach. You have a hypnosis background, NLP, somatic practices. To me, and I was saying this before we jumped on live here, you are the embodiment to me of really living from a heart center and a body centered life. And we were talking about so many clients come to us and say, okay, I want to move away from being in my mind, right? And letting my mind run my life and take me down a path I don't want to go. But actually, how do we do all that stuff? How do you actually truly know when your body's giving you messages, when your heart is guiding you? So to me, that's where we're going to start today together. So welcome.
Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, first of all, for asking me to be here. It's such an honor.
I love it.
Yeah, that is a great question. And of course, I think we end up attracting to us people and clients who are somehow similar to us in some ways. Absolutely. And I find that that's definitely true for me. So, I'm kind of passionate. I have this really cerebral side, but it's not just for a lot of people. I think when you don't work on yourself, it can easily become a source of suffering. You are too much in your head, and you become anxious and all that stuff. So I think that in order to reclaim this part of your cerebral side could be actually a source of joy. I think in order to be able to do that, there is no other way but to go through the body. And when I have someone who comes to me and says, I need to get out of my head more, I need to go towards this and that, that's just yeah, whatever. It's it's not by, I don't know if you've ever tried to get out of your head.
It doesn't work when you're trying.
It's the worst way to get out of your head.
Stop thinking about whatever, and then it's right? Everybody that says that it's all
imagining. Yeah, exactly. So good luck with that. So
totally.
So what I say always is that it's not so much that we are trying to get out of our heads, more how can we make space for other things, right? And then we will naturally have a more balanced, life. So of course, that goes through the body. Of course, that goes through everything that is coming through the senses.
Yeah.
So, and there are a ton of ways to do that, right? That's the beauty of it, especially in this day and age. We have we have so much choice around this. So it's all about, I think, going towards what really calls to us, whether it be walking or dancing or or even somatic tools, tools that allow you to process your emotions, like tapping is amazing, or there are a bunch of other things, or breathing techniques, breath work, sex. There are so many things that are available.
So I want to ask you because I think this is just going to be a fascinating answer. I'm already excited to hear what you have to say. So how did you personally again, create this for yourself? I have this feeling, right, that you haven't always been exactly this way. Tell us a little bit about your own journey, if you don't mind.
So if I have to make it really very kind of, if I can really summarize it,
Yeah.
I do have this really strong mental thing. Like my mind is definitely like one of my biggest tools, my biggest allies, I would say. It wasn't always an ally completely, right? And the thing is, for most of my life, I've lived in big cities. I was really into that stimulation. I thought that I was just a city person, and there was nothing else that I could, there was no other setting where I could be happy. And I had big moments of realization, big moments of, lots of uh, lots that I realized around, lots of big realizations, epiphanies actually, around the time I became a mother. So like 11 years ago now. And all of those roads started to take me down this one thing. And this idea that kept coming up all the time was like this evolutionary perspective, this ancestral perspective. In a really small nutshell, it's basically the idea that as individuals, like we're not that different from someone born 30,000 years ago. And our bodies and our nervous systems are super ancient because evolution is a really slow process. But the world in which we evolved for like millions of years versus the world in which we live today, night and day. Like everything is different. Everything is different. So that means we are just so bereft, of our basic needs today. And our basic needs are actually really pretty basic, and they have not really changed that much over the millennia. And yet they have become luxuries today. So what are those needs? Like I came to it through nutrition and like kind of physical well-being at the beginning, especially because I was pregnant, and it was a time of my life where I became really interested in taking better care of myself, to have healthy babies and all that stuff. But it definitely didn't stop there. It took me through then all the other aspects as well. But from the way we eat, to the way we move our bodies, to the way we have obliterated natural light, and like, and there's so much electricity and so much artificial light and screens and all of that, to the way we've been so bereft of just basic community, just seeing people, waking up to dozens of pairs of eyes every day, being known, being held, belonging, all of these things. I realized, especially as a new mom, it was painful. It was a lot of these things were actually, I didn't realize them. I wasn't cognizant of them right away, but I realized like becoming a mom was such a shock to my system. And I realized a lot of the reason why I was suffering was because of all these basic needs that we just didn't have. And of course, add to that, the fact that, I have moved around a lot in my life. So I live in France today, but this is not a place this isn't where I grew up. So, that also makes it harder, of course. We move around more. But I know that in the States, even though people don't leave the country, they are very mobile too. Like we just don't have like the structure anymore, the foundation to support us through these big life changes. So anyway, let's say, again, it was through my mind, thanks to that big curiosity I had, that I came to these ideas. But it's also thanks to these ideas that I realized, wait a second, what if we were meant for a slower life? What if we were meant for a life where we're really like not constantly barraged by this artificial stimulation in the big city, but more in nature, just being able to spend time? And like at that time, like this was 5 years ago now, my family, we left Paris and we moved to the seaside. And that just meant automatically that it removed so much stimulation, unnecessary stimulation and unnecessary stress from our lives. And that's when I really, the process had started before, but it really became more, it started to take more form as we made that big lifestyle change. And so nowadays, when I go back to Paris, it's really funny. Like last time I was there were some friends of friends who were asking me, but Aysin, where you live, is there like a cafe or bar where you can go get a drink with people? I'm like, yeah. Like, it's not like the boondocks as soon as you leave Paris, And also, that isn't even my biggest priority anymore. My biggest priority anymore is, I can leave my place and take a gorgeous like 2-hour walk. I can be in nature, and I can like pick blackberries and make dessert later. Like, those are now, or I can go to the beach, I can go swimming in the river or in the sea or in the ocean or whatever. Those are the things now that are more valuable to me and also like, I think they're worried about like the social life thing, but I'm like, okay, well, I no longer want to like go and drink till like whatever, whenever, but I'd rather, plan an event, like take a hike and, socialize that way. Like,
Absolutely.
I have changed a lot of those habits over time. So coming back to that question of your mind, like, I know that when I don't feel good, I can just turn around in circles in my apartment and like, yeah, journal the hell out of it or do thought work or whatever. Or I can just go take a walk. And within at least like within half an hour, maybe I know that I have gotten more perspective, more peace, more space, more space. I think space is maybe the word that's really relevant here.
I think you're right. And I think that, again, especially people that are kind of bred into the coaching world, thought work is kind of has been
That
kind
was
of
my entry point. That
yeah,
was my
and it
entry point
really
for
wasn't.
sure.
I mean, it was a little bit of mine in my training, but not I didn't feel it as much until I kind of grew as a coach and kind of expanded my world with around coaches. I was like, and I remember even like people are like, "Oh, you don't start with thought work?" I'm like, no, not normally." Because again, I loved your point about the mind being a beautiful ally, a beautiful source of curiosity and power for us. However, what I have found is most of the time, like you said, if you're chasing yourself around an apartment or wherever you are, if you're stressed, that's not usually the best place to start. It's like, okay, let me come in to my body. Let me come in. And to your point, I mean, I think you and I are both on the same page. I always say Mother Nature is the best life coach on the planet. You want some healing, you want some perspective. Go be somewhere where you feel grounded
Yeah.
and connected. And like you said, there's so much I think it's like the antithesis to the world what most of us have lived in, noise and clutter and busyness and incoming, that stillness, to your point about basic needs, I have found in the last decade of my life, because people always were like, you're so much quieter now. And it's like, but there's something really grounding, life affirming for me around letting that stillness be a huge part, and quiet and solitude, to fuel all of the rest of my endeavors. Before I just was on a million miles an hour and I never stopped. And, I ended up burning myself out and all the things.
Because part of us is afraid to stop. I think a lot of people are addicted to that constant go, 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 because they're terrified of what will happen if they're alone with themselves and with their minds and hearts for 5 minutes.
Oh, that's a really great point, because I think a lot of people I know are in that same space. So what do you do? What do you do when somebody wants to, they feel the desire to change, but they run up against the resistance of like that busyness kind of addiction?
Mhm.
How would you start? How did you start with yourself? How would you start with somebody else?
Um, So just for a minute, I'm going to come
Yeah,
to this question. Just
go ahead.
what you said regarding thought work, I
Mhm.
do think thought work is important, or at least like cerebral tools. I think those are
Absolutely.
important, but not as the first point of entry. They
Yeah.
are very much sold as a first point of entry and the only point of entry, but I actually disagree with that today. That's where I came from also, but my thinking around this and my practice has evolved over the years. I absolutely think you go through the body first. You go through that bodily reaction, that feeling, that vibration first. And then that becomes the portal to all the rest. Now, because the thing is, you can
Well
also
said.
take all the hikes you want, but if you don't actually develop the
True.
mental discipline afterwards, you're still going to keep going back to square one all the time. You're still going to be repeating. So
Yep.
they just complete each other, I think, in this really beautiful way.
I love
I
that.
think
I love that.
I think the intuitive tools and the somatic tools and time in nature and all these things we discussed, they are absolutely fundamental. And the mental discipline piece comes for especially things that are like recurrent thoughts or anxieties. Like
Yeah.
I call it like you decide ahead of time what you're going to think about those things. And
Mhm.
when your brain wants to go there, you just remind yourself, like, remember, this is what we're thinking about this. And we're not going to worry about this until such thing happens or that thing. And sometimes the problems just disappear by themselves.
That's true.
Um,
Absolutely.
so to speak to that, the question you asked, I just, the thing that I notice is when you're going into the thought work thing, I think it just becomes so easy to gaslight yourself. Oh, I just have the wrong thoughts. I just need to change my thoughts. But that's like completely disregarding the body, and more specifically, the nervous system.
Yes.
So that's disregarding the truth of what's going on for you in that moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you know what's interesting to me, and tell me what you think, because I'm curious if you have a different perspective. But to me, when I'm using the body, I try not to use labels. So like we're like right, the mind, I'm angry, I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, what does it feel like? Like I will literally stop and process and be like, oh, it's hot, it feels red, it feels
Yeah,
like a huge,
absolutely.
right? Rather, because I think sometimes, to your point, we want to analyze it to fix it,
Exactly.
right? Rather than
Yeah.
being with it. And to
Yeah.
your point, when you're being with it, so often it moves without you having to do anything. But
Mm.
that also, to me, the busy and the fixing kind of go hand in hand. It's like, oh,
Mm.
if there's a problem, we're not going to actually stay in the discomfort of feeling it. We're going to fix it real quick or move
Exactly.
on,
Exactly.
right?
It becomes just another way to make it go away, as
Yes.
opposed to
Yeah,
leaning into it. And
absolutely.
usually the real transformation is in the leaning into the discomfort.
Yeah.
Like you feel completely restless about the idea of like not filling your time with a gazillion things, like a Saturday morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go there. What's actually going on? Tell me, what is that vibration like? What is that? How does that buzz in your body? Like, where is it? Like you said, what color, what temperature, whatever. That's
Yeah.
already dissociating you from that state. Okay, that is already getting you curious about what's going on internally, and therefore it's making you present to what's going on. It's making you present to your current reality, which is
Yeah.
always the body, which is always the nervous system. And I find that when we go through there, then the places we go to are just, and that becomes like the portal. That's like the invitation to, maybe it's like something that dates back from when you were a little kid. Let's go revisit that memory. Let's bring some aid, emotional aid, to that child who was helpless in that moment, right? Or maybe it's another thing, or maybe it's about like, we're gonna, I don't know, do a future self meditation or something like that. But allowing as much as possible that somatic experience to lead the way, as opposed to the thoughts and the meaning and all the blah 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 that are contributing to it.
Yeah. And I love what you said, to kind of tie something in that you said earlier. There's so many different tools, right? So people can get really hung up, and I know we've seen it. People get really hung up on the way, the right way. I don't believe right. What if I use tapping today and it worked for me? Maybe it doesn't work tomorrow. So
Yeah.
this idea, and this is, I think, what me as just a kind of a coach as well. It's like I don't come to a situation thinking, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do, because it's almost like back in there was a movie, oh gosh, Miracle on 34th Street. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's an American movie, but one of the scenes,
It's a classic,
it's
right?
old. Yeah, it's
I
old.
haven't seen it. No.
Okay, well, one of the scenes with Santa Claus, the character, he worked for Macy's, and Macy's, this big department store, didn't
Yeah, I
have
know.
something. So he sent people off to go to a different department store, and people, right then, people were losing their mind. But that, to me, is the same thing in this, when you're dealing with your body, when you're dealing with your thoughts and everything, there isn't one thing that is always probably going. Now, you might have something you really love. I find something works for me for a while and I'm really into it, and then something kind of shifts to like a seasonal thing or something, and I'll go to something else. But it's this idea of like really trusting your body also too will tell you and guide you through what it is. You don't have to, again, try to figure it out using the head to figure out the body. Sometimes, to me, it gets me wonky, and it can get clients that I work with wonky as well, because it's like there is no guidebook for everybody that says, when you're doing this, go to page 1
That's
and
right.
do this, this, and this.
Exactly.
And you'll be fine, and you won't be uncomfortable anymore.
And, like, I've been asking, like, I recently asked this to a client. I was like, do you know what a yes feels like in your body?
Ooh.
And a lot of people have not even considered this for a minute. Like, okay,
Oh, good
you may
point.
not have considered it like consciously, you may have noticed it, but I think a lot of people are even cut off from their true yes and from their true no. Because
Yeah.
let's face it, we've grown up in a system that has completely shut us off from our inner guidance, right? And it's everything's been externalized.
Mhm.
So all the rewards, all the carrots and the sticks and everything
Mhm.
is externalized. And therefore, you no longer connect to your own bodily experience. And
Yeah.
so that is, I think, and I give them the homework. I'm like, okay, for the next week, I want you to pay attention. When things
Yeah.
come up, when there's a question to answer, or some, even like a stupid choice, like whatever, right, in
Yeah,
life
like, what are you
that
gonna have for
comes up.
breakfast? Gonna have some
Exactly.
oatmeal, you're
You're
gonna
like,
have some
yeah,
eggs. Yeah,
like
that,
how
like,
does that,
low-hanging
how does
fruit.
that feel in your body, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because this is also thanks to you that I became like more into human design. Actually, no, I haven't been into human design. You're into human design.
I
I'm
am.
just
I'm a
into what is it
self-proclaimed
gonna
geek.
say that's going to like give me more keys as to how I function. I'm just
I love
interested
it.
in that. I'm not interested in like digging any further. And one thing I learned, like my type is a manifesting generator. I don't know
Mhm.
if it's about my type or some other sub thing. It's so complex. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'm supposed to feel like this thing that comes from the gut. It's like this guttural thing. And it's funny because I totally understand. Like sometimes my kids or someone will ask me a question, and all I can feel from it, it comes from inside. It goes, ugh.
Yeah. Well,
Like
that's it. The gut doesn't speak. It has, like, some kind of noise, you
it's really
know?
that. Like I just, it's not a yes or a no. It's like I don't even want to consider the question. Like you are totally cramping my style. Like don't even ask me
Mhm.
that question. Like it's just this thing that comes, you know?
I love it. I
And
love
then
it.
like a yes is like, like there is a thing that also comes from the
Yeah.
inside. I mean, sometimes it's almost, it's not like sexual, but it's almost like you feel it in your, like the
Primal,
whole,
like a very
the
primal.
primal, like your
Yeah.
whole middle line of your body just kind of goes forward and comes alive, you know?
Yes.
And, and, and I think people have a hard time believing this, but what if we lived our lives from that place?
That's true.
Mm,
It's so true because I think about so often when I've had a yes like that or even a no, and then my mind again, the mind goes, "Oh, well, you can't say no to that, or you can't say yes to that," or it gets, and
it
that gets a trip.
interferes.
Yeah, totally trips me up. And then what happens to now I'm much better at honoring it now, but back, give me a good 15, 20 years ago when I was younger, I would override whatever it was that I wanted, and then I look back and I go, oh my gosh, that could have been so much easier and so much better for me had I not. But you're right, we're so tied to the external in this world. I almost, to me, redefining the good life and everything that you've been talking about, which I love your passion, it's contagious, is about stripping away,
Mm.
right? Stripping away everything we've picked up on this planet in this lifetime on this adventure that really actually doesn't belong to us, isn't the best for us. And how do we know we use our body, right? Like we
Or it
have
could have
this
been
amazing
us from a
system.
long time ago. Like maybe it was,
Yeah,
I wanted that when I was 25, but listen, at 45, it's no longer serving me. Or
true,
it could be anything. It's
true.
about like constantly revisiting and
Yes,
reassessing, you
yes. Because
know?
your yes could be different from yesterday to today too. And I think
Absolutely.
when there's a layer right underneath all of this, when we trust that.
Mm.
And I think that can be some of the hardest parts for all of us is to like trust that it's going to work out because again, part of my mind wants the plan, wants to know it has this false sense of security in a plan,
Yeah.
which all my plans, whenever I've made them over the course of my life, the more I plan, the more it goes sideways, and the more I honor the yes and say, okay, I don't understand exactly this right now, but I trust myself, I trust my guidance system. And even if I had a coach one time tell me this, and I thought it was very interesting, even if your body isn't 100% for 100%, right? 10 out of 10, what have you. Let's say it's 7 out of 10 or
Mhm.
whatever it is. She said, Stacey, do you know that the like Major League Baseball players, if you're a good batter, your batting average is like a .33, so 3 out of 10 times you get up and you do something amazing, right, at the plate. 7 times you don't. She said, but this expectation that then we put, like, again, then that creates I think some of this anxiety a little bit. It's like, oh, what if I get it wrong? Or what if I put this pressure on? What if I don't make the right choice? There is this like doom. And so I always say, even if it doesn't always work out, right, or exactly the way I think it should, like, that's okay too. Like, I
Absolutely.
don't think we're supposed to be here and have it all figured out. We would have picked a different plan.
I think that
What do you think?
that's a great point, because I think that the biggest reason that also holds people from following that gut thing, or gut, or
Mhm.
however it shows up for them, is
Yeah,
the fear. Like, it's
yeah,
thinking that, oh, this thing feels like a yes, but I'm fucking terrified.
yeah,
And
exactly.
thinking that that is some, like, that's something gone wrong. It's
Yep.
like, no, nothing has gone wrong. It's fine
Yes.
to feel the fear. It's fine
Mm,
to feel the panic. That doesn't mean that thing isn't for you, right?
right.
That just means it's going to ask you to come out of your comfort zone, which, as we know, is the only way to grow in this life, is
Yeah.
to be coming out of our comfort zone. So I think this is the biggest thing that holds people back. It's, on the one hand, not even being able to recognize their yes and their no, and on
Mm,
the other hand, letting their fear, like letting it mean that it's not, like, it's not a good idea. It's just
yeah.
not what that means. Your
Yeah.
nervous system is trying to protect you, but that doesn't mean it knows always what's best.
Totally. And to your point, our nervous system has been programmed, right, since
Exactly, in all
for
kinds of interesting
survival.
ways over the years. So
And it's interesting because I don't know about you, but I have heard this from people like, spiritual voices out in the world, and it resonates with me. I've heard it said a bunch of different ways. It's like we've had a very physical evolution on this planet for a really long time, right? We did need to survive. And now the planet is shifting into a way more, I don't know if we kind of call it spiritual evolution, but again, moving from this fear based survival energy and physically evolving to adapt to that, to tapping into all these other things that we have. I mean, when you look at intuition and there's so much that we don't even understand yet or know that we can have available to us that I think is going to guide us in ways, again, like you said, if we are willing to step out of our
mm,
comfort zone, out it hold the fear never, I haven't figured out a way to make the fear magically go away, but to be able to hold it to your point about space, can we make space for the part of us that's afraid, but not necessarily let that part of us drive
lead,
all of the decisions?
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
So
the
I
whole
know
thing.
you wanted, we talked before we got on about maybe doing like a little meditation to help people
Yes.
really see how they
Yeah.
can get into their bodies and
And
tap.
actually, that it doesn't have to be that difficult. Like, that there is a lot of wisdom in their body, and it could just be a matter of, like, just
Ooh,
like learning to listen to it,
I
you
love it.
know?
I love it.
So I'm
So
like,
I'm game. However you want to lead me through, I'm going to
okay,
be
perfect.
your.
So I'm going to ask you, you don't have to share what it is, but, like,
Okay.
think about an issue or something around which you would love some more clarity, for
Okay.
example,
I
or
definitely have
guidance or clarity or whatever, you know?
that. Okay. I got it already.
Well, I bet you do, because, we always know
Yeah,
where our work is, right? When we're in this.
totally.
Um, all right, cool. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is just to sit back and relax.
I'm going to totally do
Let's
that.
do it. Let's do a little relaxation. Yeah, allowing the eyes to close, allowing all the muscles in your body to relax from the top of your head, around the eyes and the mouth. The shoulders go down, the belly, the hips, all the way down to the legs. And I want you to relax the back of your tongue and notice how your breathing slows down. And let's just take a few deep breaths here. Take a long inhale all the way into the belly. And exhale twice as long. Noticing that little pause between breaths. Take a breath in. And exhale twice as long. Little pause. Last one. Take a breath in. And exhale twice as long. Your body has so much wisdom, so much untapped wisdom. Just in your gut alone, there are so many neurons. It's almost like a second brain. And now putting your mind in the brain in your belly, what does your gut know about this issue? What does your gut know about moving forward? And then bringing your awareness to your heart. Breathing through your heart now. Your heart, which is such an incredible center of energy and frequency in your body. What does your heart know about moving forward? And just take a moment here to hear its message. And then, finally, what does your head know? What does your head tell you about moving forward? And listening to the wisdom in your unconscious mind. Allow yourself to integrate all this wisdom and knowledge. And when you're ready, you can take a stretch and come back.
Well, that was beautiful. Oh, and as many people know, I've been having some health things, so that's what I brought to that beautiful guided meditation. And I love Aishin too. That I think sometimes people think that in order to come back into the body or come back into this wisdom, that it has to be like a 3 hour thing.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
I don't have time for that, right? Here's the busyness.
No,
I don't have time for that.
I didn't look at the time, but I think this literally takes 2 or 3 minutes.
Exactly. And so we all have 2 or 3 minutes. Even if you started that, I'm going to challenge myself and anybody listening to do that as almost like as a everyday. Like if
Yeah,
you started your day that way,
yeah.
if you ended your day, just kind of bookend for 30 days without any kind of agenda of what's going to happen. Just
Mm,
maybe you don't even have a question. You're just going to
mm.
go in there and
It could
what
just be like, what do I need to know today? Or what do my
exactly.
people need today? It could be a marketing tool. It could be anything. Yeah.
Totally. And I think that, again, I'm going to challenge all of us to do that for the next month because, especially as we're right in a season changing too, there's a lot of energy moving around. And one of the messages that I'll share all three of mine. My gut told me to go slower, like it's safe to go slow. My
Okay.
heart told me just again to like expand my own self love and my capacity to receive. And then my brain, my mind said, take one step at a time. And so it's just this beautiful, and again, to get that in a 2 minutes or 3 minutes and then anchor into that, whether it's a change of a season or whenever you're listening to this podcast, it's like that's always available to us. And when we're willing to make this space, like you said, when we're willing to redefine what actually we want and what we want right now, whatever
Mm,
we wanted before, there's no judgment, whatever we want in the future. But in this moment, what is that? And then being willing to be uncomfortable or have the fear that might be the thing that's going to guide us that way, right? Slowing down to me is always like, oh, the world's going to forget about me. And it's like, okay, stop with it. And then I choose, then to your
Yeah.
point, then it's
Yeah.
like, what do you choose when that thought comes up? And you do really then have this embodied holistic approach that isn't complicated. And
No,
that's one of my
exactly.
other things. You don't have to make it super complicated to
Yeah.
be this beautiful, embodied, powerful human
Exactly.
being.
And your gut specifically said it's safe to go slowly. That
Yeah,
is such amazing wisdom. It's
right?
safe. Not only it didn't say you must go slow
Yeah,
or
wasn't
else. It
dictating.
said it is safe to go slowly.
Yeah.
And if that fear comes up, like you could quickly tap
Yep,
around that. Like again,
absolutely.
no like complicated, like you don't have to journal for hours and hours and like do thought models or whatever. Like you just go boom,
Yes.
into
Yes.
the heart of the
Yes.
issue.
And if anybody doesn't know, if anybody's listening that doesn't know tapping, or it's also called EFT, I'll put a
Yeah,
link, or if you have a
yeah.
good link, I'll take that from you and
The
we'll
thing is,
share
I
that.
do a fast one that's really fast, but I need to record a video of myself somewhere doing it.
Yeah,
But
totally.
on YouTube, you have a ton of
There
EFT
is. So
videos. So
you can you that's how I taught myself, a book and
mhm,
YouTube, and I was
mm,
good to go.
yeah,
And to your point, I kind of again adapted it based on what is feels right for
it's
me.
super like it's so versatile,
Yeah. So and
so simple.
that is the thing. So Aishan, thank you for being here. If people were gonna pull out something, I always love to like again that one thing my mind's saying what's like take a one step at a time. Like what's the one thing that you would want somebody listening to really kind of take forward as inspiration, a practice, something to really
Mm.
kind of carry into their day and their week as they've kind of digest everything we've spoken about?
I think that the thing that comes to me is that it can be simple,
Mm.
especially if you have the kind of mind like that just loves to function and like work. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't allow your mind to complicate things. It can actually be super simple. And the more specific you can get, and
Mhm.
the more present you can get to what's really going on for you in that moment,
Yeah.
so much like goodness and so much actual change will come out of that.
Oh, there you go. That's all we all need. Mic drop on that one because that's how I try. Again, it's practice to live that way. And when my mind tells me I don't have time to stop,
Mm,
that is always when I find okay, that is when I really do need to come back and simplify and make this easier. And again, we're not cutting the mind off, we're incorporating it
no.
into the whole practice,
It's like
which is
it's
what
it's
I love.
like instead of allowing the mind to lead,
Yeah.
you're allowing the heart to lead and the mind to be in service to that. This
Mm.
is such an important distinction to understand. And if that sounds abstract, again, going back to what we said about like that yes, like if you have a body yes to something, that's your heart talking.
There you go. There you go. Practice that. If you are new to this, if you're listening and you're new to this, practice what a yes. And I always tell clients an easy way to figure that out is think of something you really like still would be a yes, like, people having their a child, right? They said yes to that, they wanted that. And find something that's an easy yes and then recreate it and like hold the memory.
That's a
And
good
that's
idea.
a really good way that they're like, well, I don't know what a yes and a no is. I always you can start with something that is a clear yes that you've made a decision on and a clear no. Bring those memories, hold them in your body, and then pay attention to what your body is saying. And that really is a beautiful guide if you're like a little overwhelmed with how to get started. We want to make Aishan and I are here to
Yeah,
make
as
it
simple as
easier.
possible. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so
Mm.
much. Okay, so Aishan, you have your own podcast, which is amazing, and all sorts of other things. Please, if people want to come into your world, how can they find you? And I promise I will put everything in the show notes. But if they're
Okay.
listening and they want to check you out immediately, where do they go?
So my podcast is called Redefining the Good Life. That's really probably the most updated, the best place to find
Okay.
me. And of course, I'm on Instagram as well. But I have the links if they find
Yep.
redefiningthegoodlife.com or search for it. All my
Okay.
links are on there. The
Fabulous.
Omnivorist. And they can sign up for my newsletter,
Ooh, yeah.
theomnivorist.com/newsletter.
Get in all this goodness. Get in.
Easy to
Get
find me.
in. Yes, 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 yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a great pleasure. And again, I feel
Thank you.
already energized from all your passion. You really are, again, this beautiful thing that is embodied. Like there's an alignment there, and you can just feel it. So we so
Thank you,
appreciate you stopping
Stacey.
by and talking about all things embodiment with us today. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Get all the delicious details and links we've mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. If you'd like to chat about this episode or learn more about how to work with me, come visit me in my private Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment, or check out my website, staceyandon.com, where you can find out more about my Leap of Faith coaching, my Map Makers group program, and the School of Intuitive Magic. Plus a special shout out for all the production and editing of this show by Richard Wilmore. That's it for now, love. Here's to living a life enchanted. See you soon.